Hi, everyone, and welcome to Woman Wednesday. I am Pastor Alex Bruning of First United Methodist Church in Jessup, Iowa, and I am so excited you're joining me for us to venture a little bit off of our Woman Wednesday beaten path. This is our first Woman Wednesday that is not about a woman in the Bible, but rather someone in history of Methodism. So today we are talking about Susanna Wesley. Susanna Wesley is known as the mother of Methodism, not because she started the Methodist movement, but because she mothered the two men who did. She was the mother of John and Charles Wesley, who are credited with founding the Methodist movement. Susanna Wesley was born January 20th. 1669. She was the youngest of 25 children, which I found to be shocking. She married at the age of 19 to Samuel Wesley, the father of John and Charles. She and Samuel had 19 children together. However, only 10 of them lived past infancy to adulthood. There were two sets of twins that she carried, but died at birth or shortly thereafter in the 9 children that she lost at birth or shortly thereafter. She died in 1742 at the age of 73. So those are just a few facts, kind of fast facts about Susanna Wesley. So I want to talk about Susanna Wesley in two distinct areas today. So I want to talk about her parenting first off, and then I want to talk about her faith. So some parenting facts. I already told you. 10 children. And as a parent, she ran a very, very tight ship. Super tight ship. Everything was scheduled. So she taught her children 6 days a week. They did homeschooling from 9 to noon and 2 to 5, 6 days a week. By 9 a.m. when school started, all of their chores were expected to be done. I've been homeschooling-ish with the aid of a teacher for, probably about 9 weeks now. And we're lucky if we do school 3 days a week. And if it's for 30 minutes. So I have no idea how she did that with 10 kids, okay? I'm trying to do it with 2. She had 10 children that she did this with. Everything was planned. Their naps were planned. Their bedtimes were planned. Their meals were planned. She was very strict in how she did those things. You ate what was in front of you. You got no choices. You went to bed at 8, whether you were ready for bed or not, and nobody sat beside your bed until you fell asleep. You were expected to just lay there and be quiet. It is said that their house was as quiet as if there were no children in it. I can't believe that, but that's what people say. She made sure she made time for each of her children individually. So she scheduled 1 hour a week to spend one-on-one with each child. So, for example, Tuesday from 2 to 3, she was with John only, and nobody else got her attention. Her and John had special 1 hour a week time. And she did this with all 10 of her children to make sure that they had her full undivided attention for a whole hour every week. I think that is awesome and impressive. And she did most of this parenting by herself. Samuel was a preacher and was frequently gone from home a lot. He also spent some time in debtor's prison. So it was really just her most of the time with their 10 children. Some other fun parenting facts. When John was older, she would write to him about rules that they had growing up. So one of my favorite articles about Susanna Wesley comes from the United Methodist Church, of course, right? UMC.org. It's called Mother Knows Best, Parenting Tips from Susanna Wesley. And John actually wrote about these parenting tips in a journal entry, August 1st, 1742. This was the day of Susanna's funeral. So This is one that I find really interesting in regards to lying. Susanna believed that children were tempted to lie when they feared punishment. To prevent this, she reasoned, a law was made that whoever was charged with a fault of which they were guilty, if they would confess it and promise to amend, they would not be punished. Let's see. Here, this one I find is very interesting. Drinking or eating between meals was never allowed unless in the case of sickness, which seldom happened. I can't imagine denying my children a snack. I don't think I would survive. Let's see. I'm trying to just find some of my favorites. So Susanna was kind of ahead of her time. This one I think is really interesting. Every one of her children was taught to read by the age of 5, both boys or girls. She wrote, putting children to learn sewing before they can read perfectly is the very reason why so few women can read fit to be heard. And so she was very, very against this. She wanted all of her children, and she educated all of her children. This school routine that I'm talking about, the 9 to noon, 2 to 5, that was for every child, regardless of boy or girl, which was not something that happened in this time. Another, this kind of overlaps parenting and faith a little bit, but the children of this family were taught as soon as they could speak the Lord's Prayer, which they were made to say at rising and bedtime constantly. Those are Susanna's words. She reminded John of that. So just, I don't know, some really interesting things. She also said that self-will is the root of all sin and misery, and worked to help her children develop self-control. So for Susanna, self-control is the opposite of sin and misery. So very interesting there. Yeah, so just a few little parenting things from Susanna Wesley there. The other one that I really like and I agree with here. Susanna expected her children to be polite. If they wanted something, they were to ask, and were given nothing they cried for, and instructed to speak handsomely for what they wanted. That's a thing we're working on in our house right now, for sure. So there are tons of other little notes on what Susanna Wesley taught her children. And so just a few, though. I mean, we don't probably agree with all of her parenting tips now, given that these were in, the 1600s. But I find some of those parenting tips just really interesting. So Susanna remembers their household. This is what I was talking about. The family usually lived in as much quietness as if there had not been a child among them. That's what Susanna remembers. A house with 10 children, as much quietness as if there had not been a child among them. That is crazy to me. So that's a little bit on Susanna Wesley's parenting. Just a little bit more on her parenting. Later in life, she wrote John and Charles about major faith things, whole decrees on different theological topics, and they sought her advice as well. In one of her letters to John, she is responding to John's questions on predestination, and she has an entire letters helping John work through his faith and his theological perspectives on different major topics within the faith. Her regimented methods in life in their household growing up, definitely we can see transferred into why we are called Methodists. There is a method to the things that we do, and it should be very methodical. And their life was very methodical. It was very thought out, very scheduled. I read somewhere that she used spreadsheets before spreadsheets were a thing. Like, they had a schedule, and so not only was her parenting style an influence on John and Charles, but as I said, so was her faith. That she wrote to John and Charles about faith issues, and they consulted her about faith issues. So one of the things that we kind of credit Susanna Wesley with was early lay ministry. So Samuel was gone frequently, and there was a supply pastor who would preach on Sundays, and Susanna felt him to be not very good. She didn't get much out of his sermons. She didn't care for them. And so she began having Bible study and prayer meetings in her house on Sunday afternoons. And at first it was just, a few friends here or there, but then word spread and people began to ask her, oh, can I come? Can I come? Neighbors and people from other towns even started coming to these Sunday afternoon family prayer meetings. And they were family prayer meetings because at the time she was not permitted to preach or to teach the Bible in a public setting. But they grew to be 200 people at times, to where they could no longer have them in her household, and she taught them outside of her household. And people were amazed at her wealth and knowledge of Bible and prayer. We are lucky to have writings of Susanna Wesley. So I want to share with you a little bit of her writings. So this book is called In Her Words. It's by a seminary professor I had, Professor Oden, Amy Oden. She taught me a lot about the early church, and so I am so thankful that she shares this book, In Her Words, Women's Writings in the History of Christian Thought, and one of those women is Susanna Wesley. So it has a whole section on Susanna Wesley, and it shares excerpts from all kinds of her writings. But one of the writings that I really love the most of Susanna Wesley's is her commentary on the Apostles' Creed. So in 1709 or 1710, she wrote an entire commentary to the Apostles' Creed, and she broke it down sometimes word by word, writing a commentary over just a single word. So she has it broken down to, I believe in God, and then she writes her thoughts on that little part of it. The Father. She writes her thoughts on that little part of it. So one of the ones I love that I have highlighted in my book. Let's see if I can. I don't know. I can't turn my camera around, I don't think. See? Okay, so there you go. You can see that I underlined and started there. So it is commentary on the line, Maker of heaven and earth. And she writes, of all things visible, nor could anything less than almighty power produce the smallest and most inconsiderable thing out of nothing. Not the least spire of grass or most despicable insect, but bears the divine signature and carries in its existence a clear demonstration of the deity. I'm a big believer that I can see God in everything, or that I should be able to see God in everything, and that there is a piece of God in each of us because we were created in that divine image. And she says that even the most despicable insect has that bit of deity, of God within them. And I think of all of the things that I can't, cockroaches and ticks and leeches. I really don't like things that suck blood. But they all carry a bit of the deity within them, a clear demonstration of God. Some of you might know the song, why, oh why did God make worms? They make me squeal, they make me squirm. I really don't know the rest of the song, but I think of that every time I read this section of hers. And I mean, she continues to break it down word by word. And I just find it amazing. So she talks about the Holy Catholic Church. So to the end of the world, the Catholic Church is composed of all congregations of men, whatever, who hold the faith of Jesus Christ and are obedient to his laws, wherein the pure word of God is preached and the sacraments duly delivered by such ministers as are regularly consecrated and set apart for such ordinances, according to Christ's institution. And the church is called holy in respect of its author, Jesus. Now, I wish you would use the word human instead of men, but here again, she recognized the holy universal church, that it was not separated by denomination, but that all are part of that. So the communion of saints. Accordingly, we believe that all saints, as well as those on earth, as those in heaven, have communion with God, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, with the blessed angels, who not only join in devotion with the church triumphant above, but are likewise sent forth to minister to those who are the heirs of salvation while they remain in this world. And perhaps we do not consider, as we ought to do, how much good we receive by the ministrations of the holy angels, nor are we sufficiently grateful to those guardian spirits that so often put by ill accidents watch over us when we sleep, defending us from the assaults of evil men and evil angels. And if they are so mindful of our preservation in this world, we may suppose them much more concerned for our eternal happiness. There is joy among the angels in the heaven over one sinner that repenteth. They are present in our public assemblies, where we are in a more especial manner hold communion with them. And it is there we join with all the company of the heavenly hosts in praising and admiring the supreme being whom we jointly adore. What knowledge the saints in heaven have of things or persons in this world we cannot determine, nor after what matter we hold communion with them in it is not at present easy to conceive. These are deep theological writings from a woman who, in the time, would not have been theologically educated as a pastor, would not be recognized as a minister, yet she is teaching and offering commentary and guiding not only her family and her sons, who bring about the Methodist movement, but hundreds of people who gather to hear her on Sunday afternoons. She was so ahead of her time when it came to this. And she even comments that in one letter, in her letter on predestination to John, she comments that I'm going to give you my thoughts, but talk to your father. He probably knows more than I do. But then she goes on to give this full treatise on predestination and the fallacies behind predestination. So if you want to read some more of her writings, I would love to share resources with you. But I still want to talk a little bit more about her faith. So I talked to you a little bit about kind of her lay ministry as a lay minister to her children, and to her congregation, and to even neighboring towns where people came to hear her. But I want to talk about a little bit more about also her personal faith, how she came to be able to preach and to speak and to know so much. So sorry, I needed a little more coffee to keep talking. So she decided early on in her life that she would never spend more time in leisure entertainment than in prayer and Bible study. Okay, so I find that shocking, and I so don't adhere to that. So, if I watch an hour of TV, I need to spend an hour in prayer and Bible study. Never spend more time in leisure activities and entertainment than in prayer and Bible study. And I find that to be a huge commitment to make, right? And I wonder about even trying to make that commitment for a day, what that would look like in my life. And in order to make sure that she lived out that commitment, she would schedule at least 2 hours to be in prayer and Bible study every day, 2 solid hours. And she, mind you, she is a mother of 10 children, running a household, educating them, serving her community, having Sunday prayer sessions, and preparing for those group meetings. So in order to do this, there are stories of how she would take her apron and put it over her head in her favorite chair, her and her Bible underneath her apron. And this was kind of her tent, her tabernacle of holiness. And when her apron was over her head, everyone in her household knew, do not disturb. Do not mess with her. This is her time for her and God. So she would sit under her apron with her Bible, studying and praying. I find that so awesome as a woman of faith to make sure to have a dedicated place and time and space where you were solely focused on God. And for her, it was when her apron was over her head. It was a time where she shut out the not chaos of having 10 children, because it was as if there were no kids in her house. It was so quiet. But she shut out everything else and focused solely on her faith and her relationship with God and building that. I find that amazing. And I wonder, what would it look like if I had my own apron? Okay, maybe it's not an apron over my head, but what would it look like if I had my own designated space where nobody could disturb me? I was reading a commentary on it, and from a mother's perspective, and I wish I could think of who wrote it now. I think it was on HarperCollins blog, I want to say, and it talked about how here's this woman who went under her apron and nobody disturbed her, and I can't even go to the bathroom by myself. So it's, it's a mom or a parent talking. I'm pretty sure it was a mom writing this, but yeah, I seriously cannot go to the bathroom alone. And if I manage to get into the bathroom alone with the door shut, I still have at least one child standing outside the door trying to get in or crying because I will not let them in. And yet somehow Susanna Wesley could put an apron over her head and block it all out, and be dedicated to God. So, and her children understood that. They understood this is a do not disturb mommy kind of time. Very proper English folks. They probably said mother. I'm not sure. But so what would it look like if I created my own apron space? My own place of, this is me and God, do not disturb. And even if it wasn't for 2 hours, but for 5 minutes, for my kids to know, mom is talking to God right now, and we do not disturb her. And to see it as holy and necessary and sacred for me. So where is your holy space? Do you pull an apron over your head? What do you do to make sure that you can focus solely on God for 5 minutes or 2 hours or whatever it might be? What do you think about not spending more time in leisure activity and entertainment than in prayer and Bible study? What would it look like to try that for a day or a week and see what it does for your faith? Yeah, interesting questions. Now, I know I've spent a lot of time talking about Susanna Wesley's kind of prayer and Bible study and teaching those things and her personal time with God. But I don't want to lead you to believe that Susanna Wesley saw faith as internal only or as prayer and Bible study only. Susanna Wesley believed in a lived faith, which we see so tremendously in the Methodist movement with social holiness, that there is no personal holiness without social holiness. And so I want to read to you a prayer of Susanna Wesley. And I've actually used this prayer in worship before, and I was reminded of it a few weeks ago. I had a member send me this prayer that she saved from our bulletin and a donation to help families during this time. And I was reminded then of how holy Susanna Wesley was and how much we can learn from her. So I want to read this prayer. This is a prayer of Susanna Wesley's. Help me, Lord, to remember that religion is not to be confined to the church or closet, nor exercised only in prayer and meditation, but that everywhere I am in your presence. So may my every word and action have moral content. May all the happenings of my life prove useful and beneficial. May all things instruct me and afford me an opportunity of exercising some virtue and daily learning and growing towards your likeness. So Susanna in this prayer is reminding herself that God's presence is everywhere, that religion is not only prayer and meditation, but every word and action we choose, and that ultimately we should choose virtue and moral character and prove ourselves useful and beneficial to God, growing in God's likeness. There's so much more we could cover about Susanna Wesley. And I would love to cover more about Susanna Wesley and to share more links and things. So if you're interested in knowing more about Susanna Wesley, let me know. I'd love to share some more resources with you to learn about her. Let us just really pray this prayer now before we go. Help me, Lord, to remember that religion is not to be confined to the church or closet, nor exercised only in prayer and meditation, but that everywhere I am in your presence. So may my every word and action have moral content. May all the happenings of my life prove useful and beneficial to you. May all things instruct me and afford me an opportunity of exercising some virtue and daily learning and growing towards your likeness. Amen. Thanks for joining me on this Woman Wednesday and learning about Susanna Wesley, the mother of Methodism. I would love to hear your thoughts and responses in the comments below, or give me a call or shoot me an email. I would love to hear about where your apron is, where you are in a do not disturb, I'm with God mode. I would love to hear what it would be like for you, or maybe what it was like when you try this experiment of spending equal amounts of time in leisure activity and prayer and Bible study. I miss you all so dearly. I do apologize that this is a week later than it was supposed to be. And I thank you for your understanding with me in these crazy times we're in. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday, and that you continue to be people of fierce faith. Love you all. Bye.